To our next panel of hockey analytics outside the NHL. And Tim Swartz, who we saw at our first discussion this morning, will moderate. And I'll just introduce the panel quickly. I'll start with, at the far side, Michael Zsolt, who, let me find my page, there it is, works for the Kitchener Rangers in the Ontario Hockey League as the Director of Analytics. Before Kitchener, Michael consulted for the Sioux Greyhounds and one NHL team after having started his blog, Original Six Analytics. Michael previously worked for the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan in its private equity division. Growing up, Michael played as a goalie in the Greater Toronto Hockey League and was a competitive rugby player for the Western University varsity men's rugby team. All right, you got to take a deep breath. Danica is the High Performance and Compliance Advisor at the University of Ottawa. Did her undergraduate degree in human kinetics and completed her master's in intervention, consultation in sport, physical activity, and fitness. She also holds a graduate certificate from the University of BC in high performance coaching and technical leadership. Danica played ice hockey for 5 years at the University of Ottawa and was team captain. She competed in 3 World Ball Hockey Championships, earning 2 gold medals. Has served as head coach and assistant coach with the Ottawa Girls Hockey Association and Nepean Girls Hockey Association. Blah, blah, blah. Danica was part of the working group that has developed Creating Inclusive Environments for Trans Participants in Canadian Sport, and is a co-author of Canadian Centre for Mental Health in Sport position statement, Principles of Mental Health in Competitive and High Performance Sport. Finally, Katie Yates will begin her 4th full season working with Boston University men's ice hockey program in an analytics capacity, and 3rd with the title of Director of Analytics. Began working with the team as a graduate student and augments the staff's evaluation of team and individual player performance by using advanced stats and video. In addition to her work at BU, Yates has also worked alongside several New England hockey performance businesses, including Prentice Hockey Performance and Mass Crease Goaltending. She holds degrees in biology and mechanical engineering from Brown University and Boston University, respectively.
Thank you, Scott. Should we use the second mic? All right, everyone. So you heard me earlier today. At Simon Fraser University, I supervise undergraduates in the summer, and they work on sports analytics projects. And I supervise master's students, and I supervise PhD students, and they all work on sports analytics projects. And they typically come to me, and they'll want to work on basketball. And basketball is a really difficult sport to contribute to because you typically don't have the really high-resolution data, the player tracking data that's necessary to make advances. So one of the things my students have been doing lately is we've been making progress in smaller sports, lesser sports, even sports as small as Highland dance, if you can believe that. We wrote a paper. And it's very rewarding when you can end up doing something and make a contribution. The people from Cycling Canada, they're really keen to work with us. And so today, during this panel session, we've been talking up till now about primarily the NHL. Now we're going to talk about hockey at different levels. So we have the OHL, the Ontario Hockey League. We have Canadian university hockey, and we also have U.S. women's hockey. So it'll be a very interesting perspective. And I'd like to begin by just asking a question to all 3 panelists. I'd like them to all respond. I'd like them to tell us a little bit about what they do in their role and how they came upon their job.
So I work with the Boston University men's ice hockey team. So this will be my 5th season in any capacity, 4th full season, 3rd with my nice fancy title. In my capacity, I am basically the main analytics presence for our team. And also, I don't know why I say main, because I'm the only analytics presence for our team. I am both the person who is playing with the data and also the person who is sitting there watching video in the dark in the middle of the night creating the data. So it's a lot of work, but it's super rewarding. I've enjoyed getting to work with our coaching staff and getting to work with the players that we have and the caliber of players that we have come through our program in the last few years. How I came upon my job, I started working at BU's Arena as a graduate student, doing just sort of like paperwork and payroll for student employees. And one day, Steve Greeley and Scott Young, who are our assistant coaches at the time, came back from lunch when I was in the middle of yelling very passionately about Dan Girardi to our group sales manager. And they I think I sort of got on their radar in that way, so they would just sort of stop on their way in and out of the place and be like, oh, what are you watching, what are you reading? And that would have been sort of end of 2014, beginning of 2015, when all of this stuff was sort of becoming more in the public sphere, and you could read about it, and I thought it was super interesting. And so one day I literally went into Quinny's office and I was like, hey, so every pro team is adding people to do this. If we're serious about our message that we're trying to send as being the pro team of the college teams, if we're committed to that message, then we need a person, and I vote for myself. And he was like, cool, I'm into it, you're the person, go be the person. I know it was like a 5-minute meeting. He was like, I know nothing about this, you are now the person, figure out what we need, get it done. Congratulations. So that was sort of how I got to here.
I'm going to use this mic. So I'm Danica Smith. I work at the University of Ottawa. So basically my job as the high performance advisors, I work with all of our coaches, not just ice hockey, but all the different varsity sports. And we look at creating, developing kind of a game-winning style and a gold medal profile of what each of their teams are going to be, what they're striving to be. So I work with recruiting as well to make sure that the athletes that we're recruiting in fit in those models that they're building. And then also, if anyone here has been in university, you know that there's all kinds of crazy stuff that happens to students in university. So I built a support program as well to make sure that all the student athletes have kind of the support that they need, and that we can really bring them from when we recruit them in their first year, and to make sure that they get to where they need to be by their last year of university, performance-wise. So yeah, I try and find a bunch of people like Katie to work with me to do a lot of the data crunching and whatnot for all the information that we're collecting from all of our student athletes and our coaches to try and build programs that are going to be successful.
Hi, so I'm Mike Zsolt. I work as the Director of Analytics for the Kitchener Rangers, going into my second season with the team. I would describe my role as leading our efforts in anything that relates to data or quantitative analysis to support hockey operations decisions. So in the context of the OHL, that could be anything from player evaluation, how they're developing, trades, our draft, or stuff with the coaches, etc. Katie has to put in all the hard work herself. We have a small group of trackers who are very dedicated and play a big role in helping. I guess as a result of that, a big part of the role is data management, because there's a lot of data coming in from different sources, and you need to efficiently aggregate it into one spot before you can do any analysis on it.
Okay, and I should have said, my plan is we'll do this for about 30 minutes, and then I'll open it up to the floor for some questions. So Katie and Mike, you both work with hockey specifically. Could you tell us a little bit about the data that you have available, and also the sorts of things, the metrics that you calculate, and how they're used?
Apologies that I'll be a bit vague. I probably won't get into the exact specific metrics. I have a bunch of other OHL teams in the room who I've been speaking to all day. But I think what I'd say is we use anything we can get our hands on. I think our approach is, there's no silver bullet. War is great, but you would never rely on just war. So there's no one number that's the most important to us, and I guess it's one relevant aspect of our league. I'm not sure how informed most in the audience are, is that we are pretty envious, I guess, of the level of data that NHL has. And today we've been talking about how little that is. Because we have to, every team in our league has to manually track player ice times. We don't know by default who's on the ice for every single event. And even when teams do track it, they have it just for their own team. They don't have it for all the opponents. So, if you reflect on Corsica and all the wonderful data available there, or the public tracking projects, just to get up to what's publicly available in the NHL is a huge amount of work.
And whatever they have, we have even less. We basically, league-wide, we basically get box scores, and that's about it. In terms of, trying to find whatever else is out there, that's me. I'm the sort of web scraping presence of trying to, anything that, like Mike said, anything that's out there, we try to have. And then in terms of just internally collected data, it's sort of the same thing where anything that we have additional above and beyond that is a lot of time and energy expended on tracking from video. But I mean, I try to be the one who gets all that done, and I err on the side of trying to collect too much data and then have to funnel it down into the sort of simpler and actionable type of things for the coaches, and sort of figure out what's going to be the impactful stuff that we're going to need for either situationally just for a game or a weekend or season, or so try to collect as much as possible, but takes a lot of time.
Okay, Danica, you were a former varsity hockey player. How does that experience affect your role in your job?
I guess a big part of my job is seeing if the athletes that we have the disposition to perform at baseline. So the one really cool thing about professional sports is that is their main focus, and that all other decisions can be made around training and competition schedule. But in university sport, there's these things called midterms and finals and life and all this other stuff that kind of gets in the way of performance a little bit. So just, I guess, my experience, being a student athlete, I understand what that is. And so that when we're looking at collecting data, it's not just necessarily performance, but it's also sleep, and it's mood scales and perceived rate of exertion and those types of things, to make sure that our plan for their training. So a coach is going to make their plan, say, okay, we want everyone to peak here, but then when we're looking at all the information we're collecting, we notice that, hey, around midterm season, nobody's sleeping at all. So maybe we need to change what our ideal plan is to make sure that there's enough room for all this other stuff that happens. So in university sport, that ends up being a huge part of it, on top of player, just pure athletic development.
Great, thanks. So this is a question for all of you. I'm sure that each of you report to someone. Do you find that what you have to tell the person is accepted, and how do you gain trust in the organization?
Sure, I can start. I guess in terms of the overall level of acceptance, I think I haven't seen inside too many other organizations, but I think I'd say my experience has been pretty good. I think when I reflect on that, I think I feel pretty fortunate to be able to say that from my position, and that really it probably starts at the top of the organization. That like our GM, Mike McKenzie, or our head coach, Jamie Key, I would consider them both pretty open-minded and progressive in their approach. And really, at the end of the day, it's just more information, and they're guys who really want to win. And so if I can share something that makes them think, yeah, if we do this, we'll have a 1% better chance to win, then all those 1% count. And I think that's helped a lot with acceptance.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm definitely in a similar boat where I feel like I'm super fortunate to sort of get acceptance pretty much right away. So we have a new head coach for this season, but he was our associate head coach for the last 4 years that I've been there. But our head coach for the last 4 years, David Quinn, he is a super open-minded guy about this kind of thing. He's very willing to learn, and he may not have it in him immediately, but like if you sort of, he'll be interested in, like, he'll sit down and I'll say, okay, walk me through this, like, this is what I like this, I don't like this, I have questions about this. If you sort of sit down and sort of walk him through it, then he's super accepting of, like, oh yeah, no, I do see how this is, you know, or what if we did this instead? I would feel like that would be a little more useful instead. I think that our coaching staff has been super, they're quick to sort of expand the circle of trust to people that they feel are, you know, it's the same thing, they want to win. So people that they see as adding value and adding percentage points to that chance of winning, they're super quick to, you know, get you on board. And I feel like, you know, I've had a great relationship with the coaches where I feel like they value what I do and that they trust my judgment on certain things. They'll ask me certain questions of, hey, what if we did this, or what if we looked at this? What are your thoughts on this guy, this unit? So yeah, no, I think that we might be in the minority with that, but I think that we've sort of had a great transition into having this be a part of our program.
So my direct boss comes from the Own the Podium stream. So the, you know, amateur sport from a national sport organization perspective is really interested in this kind of information. So I guess my job is to really be able to work with, you know, I have 10 different varsity programs, different sports. You know, hockey being one of the sports that obviously a little bit more comfortable around analytics and around data collection, where other sports, I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but might be a little bit more hesitant. So one interesting thing about working with Multisport is that, you know, you can kind of show like, hey, look at all the cool things we're doing with this team. You know, if you're interested, you know, you guys can learn from each other. So having the ability to work with different national sport organizations as well to try and learn, you know, pull from one sport to be able to apply from another sport has been super helpful. But overall, I think the trend is, you know, people are figuring it out that this is important and it's important for sustainability of success.
Thank you. I've got a sense of this so far that there's things that you've done you're very proud of. Maybe describe to us something you consider a big win from your point of view. Mike?
I'd say that's a good question. I guess my mind initially would just jump to like the team as opposed to me personally or for analytics. And like, I guess last year I'd say we came into the season as a team who was expected to be competitive but not elite. And then we finished the season, we didn't win the league, but we lost in Game 7 of the conference final in overtime against a very high caliber Sault Ste. Marie opponent. So like, I think just the hockey operations group as a whole, we really, in height, like, it's bittersweet. You'd rather score that goal in overtime, but that was something exciting for all of us.
I would say for me, the one that I would jump to in terms of like feeling like the first like big accomplishment was the first time that I heard Coach Quinn like quote me to a group of players like when he did not know that I was there, and I was like, oh my god, what? Because I'm usually up in the press box during practice just because I like to get, you know, the full view of the ice and be able to see both sides and sort of see everything that's going on. And he had the defenseman over to one side and he literally like, you know, basically word for word like quoted something that I had told him or that I had sent him about, you know, the group of defensemen from the last game. And I was like, I grabbed our video kit and I was like, oh my god, Sam, did you hear that? Like, I told him that. Like, and he just told them that. Like, yes, like he listens, he likes it, they're passing it on, like this is great. So sort of feeling like getting that sense of like, oh my god, it's actually like I'm not just, you know, sitting and crunching numbers into the wish, not just like, you know, farts in the wind, like it's like they're listening to, sorry. I heard that coming out and just but like it's actually that it's feeling like it's actually like serving a purpose and getting, you know, disseminated through the team was definitely a great feeling.
Yeah, this year is the first year that we are doing across the board collection of information with all of our student athletes. So every single member of the team is part of this after every training session. And I guess there's been just buy-in from our coaches that, you know, they have a crazy amount of experience, and their instincts are usually really good, but in order to get to the next level, it's being able to really look at a past season and at very specifically at different points of your season to really understand what was happening, what was going on with your athletes versus what was the plan. And so this year we instituted this kind of mass data collection project, and so that has been going super well, and I can't wait to see, especially around sleep, to be honest, like what happens with all the student athletes around that time and what we can learn. So we've got a support team for all of our varsity athletes, and we're going to use this information to really direct all those people on what interventions we could be using to better support and better develop athletes so that their disposition to compete is going to be a lot higher.
So we have some students out there who would like to break into the industry. Maybe you have some advice for them. Maybe you'd like to tell them something you wish you knew back then that you know now. Just general comments to young people.
Well, I'll go first this time. So, I mean, the way I got my job was luck, really. I mean, I don't think I can beat your story, but I had told the person who was, in the derivative of my position, 10 years ago, that I wanted her job, and I said, if you ever leave, I'd love to take your job. And lo and behold, she got a really cool job working international games, and she put her 2 weeks notice, and she said, I think Danica wants this job, and they were in such a panic, they said, yeah, sure, we'll put her notice. So, and I mean, the position I had back then, there was all kinds of gaps that existed within our structure, and I guess I just saw the gaps and I filled them, and at one point they realized they probably couldn't get rid of me just because I was the only one filling those gaps. So sometimes just, being proactive on that front, and over the years they just had to keep re-evaluating my job description until I'm at the place where I am now. But yeah, I mean, it was luck, and then I guess really being able to work with everyone to make sure that we're all going in the right direction.
I guess for any aspiring analytics kids out there, the advice I probably have is, if you're here already, you're doing the right thing. Like that would be a big step, I think, if you're a university student. And like generally, I find a lot of people reach out wanting to be involved, and they know a little bit, but they haven't really read all the blogs out there or the websites, and they're I'd say they're just scratching the surface. They haven't even read Rob's book. But yeah, but so I think really like my path was I started a blog. I worked on it really hard for a couple of years, and then once it helped me make a couple connections with teams, and that helped me get to my current role. And so I definitely encourage you guys just to start doing the work, put it out there in the public. It won't be great, but you'll improve. I mean, it might be great, but at the beginning you won't be as good as after a few years of it. I think that's the best way to. You'll also learn along the way is like, do you love it as much as you love watching hockey? Which I think for everyone in the room, the answer is probably yes. And then from there, people will see your work. Though to be fair, it's probably getting noisier and harder to take that blog approach with how many great sources of information are out there right now.
So I kind of similar message but different execution. I would say definitely be prepared to work super hard for not a ton of like public visibility and recognition. I have heard a number of people like make mention of like, oh, but like, does she really do anything? Because nobody's ever seen anything that she's ever done. I'm like, well, if I tell people what I do, that defeats the purpose of having me. Like, if I tell you all the cool stuff that I like, but I mean, you have to be very okay internally with like knowing that like the people who know. Like, but if you're in it for like, I want to be like, the next Scott Cullen, like, well, no, just, that there's a certain amount of, like, you're going to be working very, very hard, and you may not be, campus celebrity or the most visible member of the team or the coaching staff or the public, whatever.
Good. Okay, I'll ask one more and then I'll bring it out to the audience. And maybe you'll choose to decline this question, but if you had more resources, more time, any problem you'd like to work on right now?
I'd like to hire one of the presenters from earlier who had his machine vision project he's working on to be just our machine vision project.
Katie, Danica?
I would like to hire someone to do the actual like video breakdown and data collection because it takes forever.
I would probably hire at least one person for every single one of my teams to help them with this.
Great, so lots of jobs out there. So I'll follow Rob's lead. I'll follow Rob's lead and I'll go to this side of the room and take a couple of questions, and I'll go to the other side of the room.
For both Katie and Michael, how do you go about presenting or not presenting your advanced stats to players, and how do they react to that?
So I sort of I let the coaches be the conduit and be the deciders of sort of what gets communicated to whom and how that's communicated, because there are certain guys who are going to sort of be more receptive, or you need to show them stuff in a certain way, or frame it in a certain way, and I think that that's that's 100% the coach's prerogative to be the sort of disseminator of that information. But I mean, the guys know that if they come to me, I've had guys come to me over the years and be like, hey, walk me through this, tell me, what does this say about me, that kind of thing. So if they are one of those players who will take that initiative and come to me and be like, hey, can you tell me, a little bit more in depth about what you do and what it says about me, then I have no problem having that conversation with them. But I don't go to them with anything.
Yeah, I'd have a pretty similar message that the coaches are front and center in the player relationships, so it's always going to have to be through them, and as they see it fitting with their view of the team. I've had some chances to go through information with players, but I guess it's I guess what I would say is my general approach is to be very cautious about that. If you had all this information, like Corsica, at your disposal, it's not necessarily going to make the player play better that he knows every single thing on that page. It might help him that he knows this one metric that he was really good at in the first half of the season, he's not so good at anymore. And then you sort of, but the coaches would play a big role in trying to suss that out and help them get back to where they were before, as an example.
One more from this side of the room.
Question for Katie. Is Brady Tkachuk NHL ready, or would he have been better served by returning to school for another year?
I knew someone was going to do it. I want to preface this by saying that I love Brady Tkachuk. He's delightful. I'm incredibly upset that he's not going to be in my day-to-day life anymore, because I think he's just a high-quality human. I think he would have been better served by coming back for another year. I think that his ceiling is obviously going to be super high either way, but I think that he would be better served at this point, at this particular moment. He doesn't need to be playing 90 games a season. He needs to be in the weight room and he needs to be practicing. So I think that sort of, obviously I hope that I hope the same for him that I hope for all of our players who have sort of made that jump, that I want him to, have a long, healthy, successful career, and I want him to, I want nothing but success for him. But I think that if it were me personally, I would have been back.
Hi. I was just wondering, is there a movement towards or usage of statistics or data live during the game? Because that's what Tom Dundon is trying to do with the Carolina Hurricanes, and that's what the Philadelphia Eagles used to win the Super Bowl last year.
Are you asking, do I communicate with the coaches during the game, during the course of, from the on the bench?
There is a trend towards getting that more integrated.
I think in the college game, that's definitely not a trend that is even happening. I think that the first trend that we need to get on is having more teams be incorporating this into their coaching strategy, because we think that I'm the only one. We're not 100% sure, but we think. So I think that it's sort of a baby steps type of thing where you gotta actually have the manpower before you start doing the, do we punt on this 4th down?
So you guys collect health data, I'm assuming, associated with what you're doing. I'm wondering if you collect mental health data, and if so, how do you handle that?
I can answer for myself. For U Ottawa, we do a screening, mental health screening. We have a medical team of docs, orthopedic surgeons, athletic therapists, student therapists, and we also have a full-time mental health coordinator that works with all of our athletes. And so the mental health questionnaire screening that we do is shared with the counselor and with the docs as well. And so our athletes can self-refer themselves to see our counselor because she's full-time, so she's right there. Or the docs can refer as well. But that's not shared necessarily with our coaches. There's a lot of information that we do share with our head coaches, but the mental health part is not one of them.
Hi everyone. So you all would demand more statisticians, but do you see in your respective leagues the demand being there? And just what kind of general trends do you see around analytics in hockey?
I guess just to clarify, to start, when you say we demand more statisticians, I guess a machine, a computer vision product would be awesome. And that's probably a good trend. But I actually kind of, with the small group of trackers we have involved, I think I personally prefer to keep it to a manageable size, and I'd rather have a tight-knit group of really dedicated people who have really high data quality and like who I work with individually, as opposed to some army, right, of people helping out. But you guys can comment as well.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. I think that part of the value that we feel like we've gotten out of having this be a part of our program is the level of involvement and relationship with the coaches, where I'm in their office and they, like I said to begin with, they're very fast to sort of expand the circle of trust to people that they feel like are helping, and so that level of interaction and that level of sort of that we're all rowing in the same direction, I think has been a big part of that, and I would be hesitant to add too many people into, especially in the NCAA, where it's sort of a much more contained it's sort of a much more contained operation, where there's adding too many people would start sort of maybe overwhelm things and sort of dilute that bit of that relationship.
I would say that within the Canadian sports system, we're getting to a point where all the NSOs are trying to articulate what their game-winning style is and their gold medal profiles, and then the next part of that is going to be really being able to feed that with information so that we can make better decisions on who we're bringing on national teams, or I refer to national sport organizations just because Canadian university sport, we kind of fit within that stream, and that we want to be able to understand better kind of what they're looking for so that we can feed that information to them with regards to athletes at our level. But I do think that it's a trend that once we understand kind of where we're going, the bigger vision, then that's when we're going to need kind of more people to support it.
Okay, we'll take one last question.
So I'm really enjoying the panel. I love everybody's enthusiasm. So that's really great. I just wanted to know, how influential was Moneyball on you choosing this as a career?
Haven't seen it, haven't read it.
I think probably from my perspective it would be more the way Moneyball shaped popular culture and every baseball first and every other sport, and then I think hockey in the last 5 years as a whole has undergone a big shift. So I think 4 or 5 years ago, whenever I sort of tuned into this aspect of the sport, that was the bigger catalyst than the baseball book. But I do like it's an awesome book. I love Michael Lewis as a writer, so and I've read it, so that's slightly more than Katie.
I think it's a key communication tool. People will be like, "Oh, Billy Bean, yeah," like, but yeah, I mean, it's like super interesting and kind of a way to inform everybody about kind of what's happening.
I show Moneyball in my statistics and sports course. All right, that was really interesting. Let's thank our speakers.